The rain started just after dawn, a soft, steady drizzle that blurred the world outside my window. I sat at our kitchen table on Oak Ridge Drive, watching the water track down the glass. Betty was moving around the kitchen with her usual effortless efficiency. The smell of fresh coffee and scrambled eggs filled the room. Audrey was staring at her phone, giggling at something on her screen. It was normal, a perfect, beautiful normal. "Dad, did you see this article about the new waterfront development?" Audrey looked up, her green eyes bright with interest. "They say it could bring in thousands of jobs." I nodded, taking a sip of my coffee. "Our firm has been tracking that project. We're actually preparing a bid for their accounting contract." Betty slid a plate of toast in front of me, her hand brushing my shoulder. "You have that big meeting with the tech startup today, right? Tech Vista?" "Yeah. They're looking to scale up and need someone to clean up their books." I glanced at the wall clock. "The meeting is at 11. It should go well." Audrey toyed with her eggs. "I've got a project deadline at my marketing agency too. My boss is being brutal with the timeline, but..." She was cut off by the sharp, demanding ring of Betty's phone. I watched my wife's face change as she answered it. "Mom? What's wrong?" The shift was instant. All the color drained from Betty's face. She gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles turning white. "Wait. When did this start?" Betty's voice went high with panic. "How high is the fever?" Before I even realized what I was doing, I was on my feet. Audrey put her phone down, her face mirroring her mother's sudden dread. Okay, we're on our way." Betty hung up, her hands trembling. When she looked at me, tears were welling in her eyes. "Joseph, it's Dad. He has a fever of 103, and Mom is having severe chest pains. She can barely breathe." My heart sank. Walter and Mildred were in their late 80s. At their age, any sudden, severe illness was dangerous. "I'm coming with you." I reached for my car keys. "No," Betty said, shaking her head. "You have that Tech Vista meeting. It's huge for your career." "I'll be fine. I'll drive down to Salem and make sure they're okay. If they need to go to the hospital, I'll handle it." "Betty, your parents are more important than some business meeting." "I'll go with Mom," Audrey said, standing up and pulling her hair into a ponytail. "They need both of us. You focus on your meeting, Dad. We've got this." I looked at my daughter, so smart, caring, and reliable. I felt a surge of pride. Even in a crisis, she knew what mattered most: family. Always family. "Are you sure?" I asked, looking between them. Betty was already grabbing her purse. "We're sure, Joseph. You've worked too hard for this opportunity. We'll call you the second we get there and let you know what's happening." Audrey grabbed her jacket. "Don't worry, Dad. We'll take care of them." I pulled them both into a tight hug. Betty's perfume, the familiar lavender scent she'd worn for 30 years, washed over me. Audrey squeezed my hand. "Call me as soon as you arrive," I said. "I don't care if I'm in the middle of my presentation. If they need to go to the emergency room, I'm driving straight to Salem." "We will," Betty said, kissing my cheek. "I love you, Dad." Audrey was already heading out the door. I stood in the doorway, watching their car pull out of the driveway. Betty's silver sedan disappeared around the corner, its red taillights fading into the rain. Without them, the house felt empty and strange. I walked back to the kitchen, poured another cup of coffee, and sat at the quiet table. The eggs were cold. Audrey's phone charger was still plugged into the wall. Betty's reading glasses sat on the counter next to her half-finished crossword puzzle. I pulled out my phone and looked at my calendar. the Tech Vista meeting. A 2:00 p.m. follow-up call with another client. Dinner plans with the Johnsons on Saturday, which we'd obviously have to cancel if Walter and Mildred were seriously ill. But there was a lingering, uneasy feeling in the back of my mind. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't point to a single detail that seemed out of place. Maybe it was the way Betty grabbed her purse just a fraction too quickly. Maybe it was the slight urgency in Audrey's voice when she offered to go. Maybe it was just anxiety, that quiet instinct warning me of trouble. I walked into the living room and stood by the fireplace, where our family photos were displayed. My wedding day with Betty, looking unbelievably young. Audrey's college graduation, her smile bright under her mortarboard. The three of us on vacation at Cannon Beach, laughing at something I couldn't even remember now. 24 years of marriage. 24 years of building a life together. A daughter we raised with every ounce of love we had. In-laws who welcomed me into their family from day one. Everything I cared about was right there in those frames. So why did I feel like I was standing on the edge of a cliff? I checked my watch. 10:15 a.m. The Tech Vista meeting was in 45 minutes. I should be heading out, preparing my materials, reviewing the proposal one last time. But I couldn't shake the feeling. I pulled up Betty's contact on my phone, my thumb hovering over the call button. She had barely hit the highway. Calling her now would just make me look paranoid. I put the phone down, then picked it up again. This was ridiculous. They were fine. Betty and Audrey were handling a family emergency, and I was sitting here inventing problems. I made a decision. I walked to the hallway closet, grabbed my coat, and took my keys. I'd stop by the florist, get some white lilies for Mildred, and grab some over-the-counter medicine, just in case. Then I'd drive down to Salem to see Walter and Mildred myself. Tech Vista could wait. They would understand. Family always came first. 20 minutes later, I was driving down the road, a bouquet of white lilies on the passenger seat next to a pharmacy bag. The rain was coming down harder now, a steady beat against the windshield. I didn't know it then, but I was driving toward the end of everything. The end of my marriage, the end of my trust, and the end of the life I had built. 2 hours later, I would be standing on Walter and Mildred's porch, watching my entire world fall apart. But in that moment, driving through the rain, I still believed the lie. I still believed we were a perfect family. I'd been driving for 45 minutes, the windshield wipers keeping time with my thoughts. The highway stretched south, cutting through the gray landscape, as farmlands and trees blurred past. I kept thinking about Mildred and Walter. They had been a part of my life for 24 years, ever since the day I nervously asked Walter for permission to marry his daughter. He'd stared at me over his reading glasses for 3 long seconds before breaking into a grin and shaking my hand so hard I thought my arm would come off. "Welcome to the family, son," he'd said, "son." Mildred had been just as warm. Every Thanksgiving, she made her famous apple pie just because she knew it was my favorite. Every Christmas, she'd slip me an extra piece of fudge with a quiet wink when Betty wasn't looking. Good, kind people. And now, at 80 and 78, they were facing a major medical emergency. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. A high fever could easily turn into pneumonia at their age. Chest pains could mean something far worse. I had stopped at a small grocery store about 10 miles back to buy some white lilies, Mildred's favorite. Then I went to a pharmacy to get some pain relievers and fever reducers. The pharmacist had given me a sympathetic look when I explained why I needed them. Now, as I took the Salem exit, the rain seemed to pick up. The sky was the color of old steel, and heavy clouds suggested the weather wouldn't clear up anytime soon. I navigated the familiar streets. Betty and I had made this drive countless times over the years for birthdays, holidays, and Sunday visits. I knew every turn, every light. Sycamore Street appeared on my right. I turned, drove 3 blocks, and there it was. 847 Sycamore Street. A modest, single-story ranch house with cream-colored siding and dark green shutters. A small, neatly manicured lawn ran down to the sidewalk. Walter's old pickup truck was parked in the driveway. Strangely, the front gate was wide open. I took my foot off the gas. That wasn't right. Walter and Mildred kept that gate shut. Always. Walter had installed it himself 15 years ago, because a neighbor's dog kept digging up Mildred's rose bushes. He was incredibly strict about keeping it locked. Yet today it was wide open, swinging slightly in the wind. I drove past the house and parked under a large oak tree about 30 yards away. An unexplainable instinct told me not to pull up directly in front, not to announce my arrival. I sat there for a moment, the engine idling, the wipers scanning the windshield. Through the rain-streaked glass, I could see the house clearly. The lights were on inside. There was no sign of a medical emergency, no ambulance, no frantic movement. I turned off the engine, grabbed the flowers and the bag of medicine, and stepped out into the rain. The walk up to the house felt longer than usual. My footsteps echoed too loudly on the wet pavement. My shoes squelched softly in the damp grass as I crossed the yard, and then I heard it, the sound of a television. It was clear enough that I could hear a game show host's enthusiastic voice, followed by the laughter of a studio audience. I froze. Sick people don't watch game shows. People with a 103-degree fever and severe chest pains don't sit in front of the TV. They should be in bed or on their way to the hospital. My heart began to race. I approached the house silently. The front door was slightly ajar, just a crack, but enough for me to see into the dim hallway. I reached out and pushed the door open a few inches. It moved silently on its hinges. The interior looked completely normal. Mildred's collection of ceramic figurines lined the hallway shelf. Walter's coat hung on the rack. The familiar smell of the house, a mix of old wood, vanilla candles, and lavender, wrapped around me. I stepped inside, keeping my movements as quiet as possible. I set the flowers and the pharmacy bag down on a small table near the entryway. My hands were shaking, though I couldn't say why. The television was louder now, coming from the living room at the end of the hall. Underneath the noise of the TV, I could hear voices. Not cries for help, just casual, everyday conversation. I walked down the hallway, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they would hear it. Every step felt like thunder, even on the carpeted floor. The living room doorway was just ahead on my right. The voices were clearer now. One was Walter's distinctive baritone, slightly raspy with age. The other was Mildred's softer tone. I reached the doorway and looked inside. My entire world spun. Mildred was sitting on the sofa, a plate of cookies on her lap, watching the TV. She was wearing her favorite purple cardigan. There was no sign of chest pain, and she wasn't having any trouble breathing. She reached for another cookie, took a bite, and laughed at something on the screen. Walter was in his recliner, his morning newspaper spread across his lap. His reading glasses were perched on his nose. No fever, no illness. He looked up at the TV, chuckled at a joke, and went back to his reading. They were both completely, undeniably fine. I felt like I'd been hit in the stomach. Betty had lied to me. The words repeated in my head. Betty had lied to me. There was no emergency, no sick parents, no crisis that required her and Audrey to rush down to Salem. So why were they here? As if answering my unvoiced question, I heard Betty's voice drift from the back of the house, near the kitchen. "We need to move quickly," she was saying. "We can't keep waiting." Then came Audrey's voice. "I know, Mom, but we have to be careful. If he finds out before we're ready, he won't." Betty's tone was firm, confident. "Joseph trusts us completely. He always has." My legs felt weak. They weren't talking about medicine. They weren't discussing doctor appointments or hospital visits. They were talking about money. My money. They were talking about me. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and started recording. I needed proof. I needed to know this nightmare was real. My fingers fumbled on the screen, but finally, the red recording dot appeared. I held the phone up, moving as silently as possible toward the kitchen doorway. Every step felt incredibly risky. If a floorboard creaked, if my shadow caught the light, they would know I was there. I pressed myself against the wall just outside the kitchen entrance, close enough to hear every word but hidden from view. Betty's voice came through clearly. "Did you transfer the $3,000 this week?" "Handled it this morning, Mom." Audrey sounded casual, like she was discussing a trip to the grocery store. "Dad never checks those statements anyway." $3,000? This week? That meant this wasn't the first time. "What's the total now?" Betty asked. There was a pause. Then Audrey spoke. $234,000. "A few more months, and we'll have enough." The number hit me like a physical blow. $234,000. Nearly $250,000. Gone. Taken by my wife and daughter. My vision blurred. I leaned harder against the wall, needing something solid to keep myself upright. "Are you sure he won't notice?" Betty's voice held a hint of worry. Audrey laughed. She actually laughed. "Mom, Dad is a financial advisor, but he's so buried in his client's work that he never looks at his own accounts. It's actually pretty funny when you think about it." Funny. She thought destroying my life was funny. "Sometimes I still feel a little guilty," Betty murmured. "Don't," Audrey interrupted, her voice turning cold. "He's ignored our emotional needs for years. You deserve this. We both do." Every word was a knife. I had ignored their emotional needs? I thought of every birthday party I planned for Audrey, every dance recital I attended, every parent-teacher conference, every late night, helping her with homework, teaching her to drive, being there when her heart was broken. I thought of Betty. 24 years of marriage, 24 years of working hard. To provide for our family, building a life together, believing we were happy. Had I missed something? Had I been blind to their unhappiness? Or was this just a story they told themselves to justify what they were doing? "The transfers have been clean," Audrey continued. "I've been splitting them across 3 different accounts. Even if he does look, which is highly unlikely, it just looks like normal business expenses. You're too smart for your own good, sweetie. I learned from the best, Mom." They sounded proud, like they were discussing a successful business venture, not systematically draining my life savings. My chest felt incredibly tight. I couldn't get enough air into my lungs. The hallway seemed to tilt. This couldn't be real. These were the people I loved. I wanted to storm into the kitchen, throw my phone on the table, demand an explanation, and see the look on their faces when they realized I knew everything. But something held me back. I needed more. I needed to understand the full scope of what they were doing. How long had this been going on? What did they plan to do with the money? Was it just the two of them? Or a man's voice came from the living room. Everything is set. I froze. A man. There was a man in the house, a voice I didn't recognize. "We'll be right there," Betty called out. "Joseph still doesn't suspect a thing." The man laughed, a low, confident, casual sound. Perfect. My blood turned to ice. Who was he? Why was he here? Why was Betty speaking to him with such familiarity? "We should probably get going," the man continued. "Don't want to risk him actually showing up." "He won't," Audrey said. "He's stuck in that Tech Vista meeting. He'll be there for hours." Planned this. They had planned this. Timed it perfectly. They made sure I was occupied so they could gather here and discuss how to ruin me. The man said something else, his voice too quiet for me to catch. Betty responded with a laugh. A warm, intimate laugh that I recognized instantly. It was the laugh she used to reserve only for me. I had to see him. I had to know who was part of this conspiracy against me. I crept back toward the living room doorway and peeked inside. What I saw made me shudder. Holding my phone steady, still rehoarding, I positioned myself where I could see the room without being spotted. The angle was awkward, forcing me to lean against the frame, but the view was clear. A man was sitting on the sofa. He looked to be in his early 30s, well-built, wearing dark jeans and a fitted sweater. He was handsome, with an easy, confident posture that suggested he was used to getting whatever he wanted. He was sitting close to Besadzidi. Too close. His hand was resting on the armrest between them, his fingers lightly brushing her arm. Betty didn't pull away. She smiled at something he said. Her body language relaxed and comfortable. She was having an affair. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. 24 years of marriage. And my wife was involved with a man young enough to be her son. But then, Audrey walked in from the kitchen. She was carrying 2 coffee mugs, moving through the space with easy familiarity. She handed one to Betty, then walked around the coffee table and handed the other to the man. "Thanks, babe," he said, taking the mug. The man stood up and walked over to Audrey. He touched her arm, a lingering, intimate gesture. Audrey smiled up at him. It was a comfortable, warm smile. My brain scrambled to process what I was seeing. Was this man involved with Betty, or was he with Audrey? I watched the man sit back down on the sofa, but this time, he sat right between the 2 women. Betty was on his left, Audrey on his right. He spoke to both of them, gesturing as he talked, but his body language with Audrey was different. Intimate. The way he looked at her. His hand kept finding reasons to touch her shoulder, her hand, her knee, and Betty, my wife, either didn't notice or didn't care. What was going on here? My phone was still in my hand, still recording. I switched to the camera, set it to silent, and began taking photos. I zoomed in. The man's face was clear. I took another of the man sitting with Betty, his hand on her arm. Then, one of him close to Audrey, their heads nearly touching. Through the window, in the background, I spotted a car, parked in the driveway, that I hadn't noticed before. A dark blue sedan. I zoomed in on the license plate. Oregon. HKR 2947. I needed to know who this person was. I needed to understand his role in whatever was happening to my life. The man laughed at something Audrey said. "You're brilliant. Joseph never saw any of this coming." Hearing my name come out of his mouth felt like a cruel joke. "He's too trusting," Betty said. He always has been. It made things very easy for us. Us, the three of them. A team working against me. How much longer? The man asked. A few months, Audrey replied. Then we can take the final step. The final step. What did that mean? I took one last photo of the three of them together, capturing their quiet conspiracy, and then carefully backed away from the doorway. My heart was beating so hard, I was terrified they would hear it. Every step backward felt incredibly dangerous, like trying to disarm a bomb where one wrong move would trigger an explosion. I reached the front hallway. The flowers and medicine I'd brought sat on the entryway table, mocking me. I picked them up, leaving no trace that I had been there, and slipped out the front door. I pulled the door shut quietly behind me and walked quickly across the wet lawn to my car. The rain had intensified. By the time I reached the car and got inside, I was soaked. I sat behind the wheel, staring ahead without starting the engine. I pulled up the photos on my phone. The man's face filled the screen. Handsome, confident, smiling. Who were you? I scrolled to the next photo. Him and Betty, then him and Audrey, then the license plate. I could track that. I could find out who owned the car and get a name. But then what? The rain drummed against the roof, mirroring the chaos in my mind. Through the streaked windshield, I stared at the house. The windows glowed with warm light. Inside, my wife and daughter were plotting with a stranger to ruin me. Over $200,000 was already gone, and they weren't finished. A few more months, and then we can take the final step. What was the final step? What else had they planned? I looked at the photos again. The man's face, the comfortable intimacy he shared with both my wife and daughter, the way they formed a closed circle. Suddenly, a cold realization washed over me. This wasn't just about money. This was far larger, darker, and more calculated than simple theft. They were planning something that went way beyond stealing my savings. Something that required months of preparation. Something they seemed certain I would never recover from. I sat in that car for 20 minutes as the rain poured down, staring at a stranger's face on my phone screen. My wife, my daughter, a man I'd never seen before, and a betrayal deeper than anything I could have imagined. I drove home in a daze. When I opened my laptop to check the bank accounts, my worst fears were confirmed. The highway had stretched out endlessly on the drive back. The rain had stopped, leaving the wet road reflecting the gray sky. I barely remembered driving. My hands had gripped the wheel. My foot had pressed the pedal, but my mind was entirely elsewhere. Betty's laugh, Audrey's cold voice, the stranger's confident smile. $234,000. By 3 p.m., I pulled into the driveway. The house looked peaceful and normal. Nothing had changed on the outside. Inside, everything had. I unlocked the door and walked into the silence. The house was empty, harboring secrets I had been too blind to see. I walked straight into my office, shut the door, and sat at my desk. My laptop was waiting. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Please, let this be a mistake. Please, but I already knew it wasn't. I logged into our bank account, the joint kick-out into the rain, the joint checking account Betty and I had shared for 24 years. I set the date range to 18 months and hit search. The screen loaded. It was all there. Every single week, regular as clockwork. Wire transfers, $3,000. Tuesday 1 week, Thursday the next, but always there. Week after week after week, the destination. An investment account in the Cayman Islands. An account I had never authorized. I did the math anyway. $3,000 times 4 weeks, times 18 months. That came to $216,000. I scrolled deeper and found the rest. Scattered larger transfers. $5. Out here, $8,000 there. Another $3,000. The grand total was $234,000. Exactly as Audrey had said. My chest tightened. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, water dripped from the trees. A neighbor was walking his dog. Normal life was continuing, while mine was falling apart. I had worked 60 hours a week for that money. I had skipped vacations and missed dance recitals because of client deadlines. I told myself it was worth it because I was providing for my family. And for what? To fund my own ruin, I pulled out my phone and dialed the one person I knew I could trust. Benjamin Clark, my college roommate, and now one of the top family law and asset protection attorneys in Portland. "Joseph, my friend, how are things?" His voice was warm and friendly. We hadn't spoken in months. "Ben, I need your help. It's an emergency." Something in my voice made his tone shift instantly. "Can you make it to my office in 30 minutes? "I'm on my way." I hung up and immediately dialed another number. Philip Benson had been my accountant for 10 years. Meticulous, thorough, and completely trustworthy. "Joseph, what can I do for you?" "Philip, I need every single financial record, every account, every transaction, every document." "Go back 3 years." A brief silence followed. Philip was smart enough to read between the lines. "Is everything okay?" "No. But it will be. How fast can you get this?" "I'll pull an all-nighter and get everything. You'll have it tomorrow morning." "Perfect. Thank you." I set my phone down and took a deep breath. The pieces were falling into place. Legal representation, financial documents, evidence. This was real. It was happening. I looked back at my computer screen, staring at the transactions that represented my life's work being drained. Every single transfer represented hours I had spent away from home. Every client I had helped, every bit of trust I had built. I had built a career helping people protect their wealth, yet I was too busy to notice my own family stealing from me. It was exactly like Audrey said. Dad is so buried in his client's work that he never looks at his own accounts. She was right. She had studied me, found my blind spots, and exploited them perfectly. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Betty. "How's your meeting going?" "Hope it's great. Love you." I stared at the words until they lost all meaning. Then the phone started ringing. Betty's name flashed on the screen, her contact photo showing her smiling at me. A picture from last summer at Cannon Beach, where she told me how lucky she felt. She couldn't know that I knew. Not yet. It wasn't time. I couldn't say a word until everything was ready. The phone rang 3 times. My finger hovered over the accept button, but I couldn't do it. I let it go to voicemail. Guilt twisted in my stomach. For 24 years, I was the husband who always answered, who was always there. But that husband was a fool. That husband chose blind trust while being taken for everything he had. I couldn't be that man anymore. My phone buzzed again with a voicemail notification. I ignored it. Instead, I grabbed my keys, laptop, and the printed bank statements. It was a 30-minute drive to Benjamin's office. I needed to move. As I locked the front door, another text came from Betty. "Is everything okay?" "You didn't answer." With steady hands, I typed back, "Sorry." In the car. Meeting ran late. Heading to see another client now. Talk tonight. Love you. The lie came easier than I expected. I got in the car and headed toward downtown Portland, toward Benjamin's office, and toward whatever came next. Behind me, The house stood empty, holding the secrets I had been too blind to see. But I wasn't blind anymore. Benjamin listened to the recording in absolute silence. When it ended, he looked at me with a mixture of pity and cold anger. His office sat on the 20th floor of a downtown Portland high-rise. Outside, the city lights were beginning to flicker as dusk settled in. The office was filled with modern furniture, a wall of legal books, and a desk that probably cost more than most cars. I had driven there in a daze, the recording on my phone feeling like evidence of a crime I still couldn't fully accept. Benjamin had cleared his schedule just as he promised. Now, he sat across from me, his expression darkening with every word from the recording. "Did you transfer the $3,000 this week?" Followed by Audrey's response. "Handled it this morning, Mom." For 5 minutes, my family casually discussed how they were robbing me. When the audio finally stopped, the silence in the office was deafening. "Joseph," Benjamin said, his voice controlled but laced with anger. "This is fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. This isn't just a bad marriage. This is criminal." Then I showed him the photos. The man sitting comfortably between my wife and daughter on the screen. "We need to identify him immediately," Benjamin said, clearing his throat. "I suggest we hire a private investigator. Beverly Quinn. She's the best in Portland. Don't worry about the cost." He nodded, already taking notes. "Here's what we do. You do not confront them. Not yet. We build an ironclad case first. Financial records, surveillance, proof of every single transaction. If you confront them now, they'll destroy evidence, get lawyers, and we'll lose our leverage. So, I just pretend like nothing is wrong." "Exactly." He looked at me intently. "I know it's hard, but we strike when we are fully prepared. Not a moment before." The drive back felt longer than usual. I kept checking the time. Philip was arriving with the financial records at 8:30 p.m. By the time I pulled into the driveway, night had fully fallen. I sat in the car for a moment, composed myself, and walked inside. Philip arrived right on time. In my home office, he spread the documents across my desk, a thick stack representing 3 years of my financial life. "Joseph, you need to look at this," he said heavily. He showed me the first document, a mortgage on our house for $120,000, dated a year ago. "I never took out a mortgage," I said. "Someone did. Look at the signature." I looked. It was supposed to be my signature, but the handwriting was slightly off. It was close, but not quite right. "That's not my signature." I figured. Philip pulled out another document. "And there's this. Your life insurance policy. 6 months ago, the beneficiary was changed." I stared at the paper. In the space where Betty's name should have been, I saw Audrey's. "I never authorized this change." "Someone did. Someone with access to your personal information, your signature, and your accounts." My hands went cold. "They're planning something much worse than theft." "It looks that way," Philip said grimly. "I'll have a complete analysis by the end of the week. But Joseph, you need to be very careful." The sound of the front door opening made us both freeze. "Dad, we're home!" Audrey's voice echoed through the house, bright and cheerful. I looked at Philip. He quickly gathered the documents and slid them into his briefcase. "Act natural," he whispered. "I'll slip out the back." I took a deep breath, forced a smile onto my face, and walked out of the office. Audrey was standing in the hallway, her face glowing with what looked like genuine happiness. She rushed forward and hugged me tightly. "Grandpa and Grandma are doing much better." I hugged her back, feeling my heart break. "That's wonderful, sweetie." Betty appeared behind her, looking tired but smiling. She kissed my cheek. "Thank you for being so understanding about us rushing off." "Of course. I'm just glad they're okay." The lies were coming easily now. "Let me order some pizza. It's a bit late for dinner." "That sounds perfect," Betty said, squeezing my hand. "I'm exhausted." 20 minutes later, we were sitting around the kitchen table with an open pizza box between us. A normal family eating a normal dinner. Audrey talked about the stress of her job. Betty mentioned visiting her parents again next week. I nodded, smiled, and asked questions, playing the part of the caring father and devoted husband. But inside, I was dying. With every word Audrey spoke, all I could hear was her voice on the recording. "Dad never checks his accounts. It's actually pretty funny." Every time Betty touched my hand, I felt the phantom presence of the stranger's hand on her arm in Salem. Yet I smiled. I laughed at Audrey's jokes. When Betty yawned and said she was going to sleep early, I kissed her forehead. "I'll be up in a minute," I told her. "Just want to clear a few work emails." She went upstairs. Audrey followed shortly after, calling out goodnight from her room. I sat alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the empty pizza box and the ruins of my life. Later, I lay in bed next to my wife, listening to her even breathing. She slept peacefully, without a hint of guilt. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing with evidence and plans. The changed beneficiary, the forged signatures, the hidden accounts, the mystery man. $234. Zero already gone. Tomorrow, I would call Beverly Quinn. Tomorrow, the real investigation would begin. For the next week, I became an actor in my own life. Every smile was rehearsed. Every "I love you" tasted like ash. Friday morning marked the first day of the investigation. I sat across from Beverly Quinn in her Eastside Portland office. The space was practical, lined with filing cabinets with computer screens displaying surveillance footage from other cases. Professional and efficient. Exactly what I needed. Beverly was in her 50s with sharp, observant eyes. She had an air about her that made you feel she could see right through whatever you were trying to hide. "Tell me everything," she said. I showed her the photos, the recording, and the license plate. HKR 2D947. She studied every piece of evidence and took notes. "I'll find out who he is, where he goes, and exactly who he's with. I need everything, no matter how much it hurts." "You'll have answers in a week," she said, looking straight at me. "But Joseph, prepare yourself. The truth is rarely easy to hear. I already knew that." The drive home felt surreal. I was about to spend the next week pretending nothing had changed, while a stranger investigated my family's betrayal. That weekend was pure torture. Saturday morning, I made breakfast. Betty came down in her robe, kissed my cheek, and told me the omelet was perfect. I smiled and kissed her back, tasting nothing but lies. Audrey joined us, bright and bubbly. "Dad, this is amazing. You're the best." "Anything for my girls," I replied, the words feeling completely hollow. At work, I couldn't focus. Clients asked questions, and I had to ask them to repeat themselves. The numbers on the spreadsheets blurred together. My assistant knocked on my door Tuesday afternoon. "Mr. Barrett, are you feeling all right? You seem a bit distant." "Just have a lot on my mind." "I'm fine, but I wasn't." Every night, I returned home to family dinners. Betty would talk about her day, visiting friends, running errands, helping her parents. All of it likely lies. Audrey would share her excitement about work projects and marketing campaigns. The new campaign launches next week, Dad. I think it's going to be huge. That's great. Sweetie, you work so hard. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table and demand the truth. Instead, I smiled like a good father and asked follow-up questions. By Wednesday, Betty noticed something was off. Honey, you look exhausted. Is everything okay? Yeah, busy season. You know how it is. Well, maybe you should take a day off soon. I will soon. Another lie to add to the pile. The nights were the worst. Lying next to Betty in the dark, listening to her breathe while my mind spun with evidence and questions. She slept so peacefully. I stared at the ceiling until dawn. On Thursday night, I broke down in my home office, sitting alone in the dark with my head in my hands. 24 years of marriage. A daughter I had raised from the day she was born. Was any of it real? My phone buzzed. It was Beverly. Joseph, I've identified him. His name is Evan Cross. He's 32. A personal trainer at the Equinox in the Pearl District. He lives in a luxury apartment nearby. My hand went cold. Is he with my wife? I'm still verifying the details. Give me a little more time. 2 days later, she called again. Joseph, I've been tracking Evan for 5 days. He meets with Audrey every single day. Coffee shops, his apartment, restaurants. They are definitely involved. I felt sick. What about Betty? He's met Betty twice. Both times Audrey was present, but the body language. Beverly paused. He's not with Betty, Joseph. The intimacy, the way he looks at her, the touching. It's all directed at Audrey. The words took a moment to sink in. You mean Evan is my daughter's boyfriend, not my wife's. I sat down heavily. The room felt like it was spinning. The mastermind was Audrey, not Betty. My daughter, my little girl, was manipulating her own mother, using her. And Betty either didn't see it or didn't care. I thought of the life insurance document, the change of beneficiary to Audrey's name instead of Betty's. She's planning something, I whispered. Something much worse than theft. Joseph, there's more, Beverly said, her voice grave. What is it? I've been monitoring online activity. Audrey has been searching for information on substances that leave no trace. I also checked your car's maintenance records. Someone tampered with your brakes 3 weeks ago. The world stopped turning. What are you saying? Beverly's voice was steady but heavy. I'm saying your daughter might be planning to end your life. 3 days passed in an uneasy silence. I went through the motions of my life. Work, home, family dinners. But I watched Audrey carefully. Then, on the 10th day, the attempt on my life actually happened. Wednesday afternoon, 5:45 p.m. I left my office building and walked toward the parking garage, carrying my briefcase, my mind occupied with client files and Beverly's latest report. The rain had started again, Portland's eternal companion. I got into my car, started the engine, and merged onto I-5 South, heading home. Traffic was typical, busy but moving. The rain made the road slick, and headlights reflected off the wet asphalt. I stayed in the middle lane, setting my cruise control to 65. About 15 minutes into the drive, the car in front of me braked suddenly. I tapped my brake pedal, nothing happened. The pedal went straight to the floorboard, no resistance, no deceleration. My car kept rolling forward, its momentum carrying me toward the stopped traffic ahead. No, 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 no. I pumped the brakes. Nothing. I pressed down harder, but the pedal hit the floor uselessly every time. There was a concrete barrier to my right. Cars closing in quickly behind me, and a semi-truck barreling down the highway to my left. I swerved to the right, cutting across the lanes. The tires shrieked. Horns blared as the semi missed me by inches, the rush of air shaking my car as it roared past. My vehicle slid sideways across 2 lanes of traffic. I pulled the emergency brake, gripping it with everything I had. The car shuddered violently, fishtailing, but finally began to slow down. I guided it onto the shoulder, fighting to keep control as gravel kicked up under the tires. The car bumped and jostled before coming to a complete stop. I sat there, my hands locked onto the steering wheel, my heart pounding so hard I thought my ribs would snap. The edges of my vision went blurry. Cars rushed past, some honking, most ignoring me. A tap on the window made me jump. "Sir, are you okay?" A man in a raincoat, his face full of concern, was leaning against the glass. I nodded, unable to speak, and rolled down the window. "Are you all right?" That was incredibly close. The brakes failed. My voice sounded distant. I need a tow truck. "Do you want me to call someone for you? I'll handle it." "Thank you." He hesitated for a moment, then walked back to his car. With trembling hands, I called for a tow. 30 minutes later, my car was loaded onto a flatbed. The driver recommended a nearby shop. I rode with him, my body still shaking. At the shop, a mechanic went under my car while I waited in the office, drinking terrible coffee and trying to stop my hands from trembling. 20 minutes passed. The mechanic came out, wiping his hands on a rag, his expression serious. "Mr. Barrett, your brake lines were cut. This was deliberate." My coffee cup stopped midair. "What?" "Someone tampered with your vehicle. Look." He pulled up photos on his phone. "These are clean cuts, not wear and tear. Someone wanted your brakes to fail." I stared at the images of the clean cuts on the brake lines. Precise. Deliberate. "This is sabotage, sir. You need to call the police." I called the police from the shop. An officer arrived within an hour, took my statement, photographed the cut brake lines, and filed a report. "Do you have any idea who might have done this?" he asked. Pen hovering over his notepad. I thought of Audrey, of Beverly's discovery, of the brake tampering 3 weeks ago that had finally culminated today. "No," I lied. "Do you have security cameras at your house?" "No." I realized just how vulnerable I was. No cameras, no protection, living with someone who wanted me dead. "Be careful out there, Mr. Barrett. Whoever did this was looking to cause a serious accident." He gave me a case number and left. By 8:30 p.m., I was taking an Uber home. My car would be in the shop for days, and I'd have to rent one tomorrow. I walked through the front door to find Betty and Audrey sitting on the sofa watching TV. Audrey immediately jumped up. "Dad, we heard about the car. Are you okay?" She rushed over and hugged me tightly. I stood there rigidly, studying her face over her shoulder. Was that genuine concern? Or was she disappointed that I was still alive? "What happened?" Betty asked, standing up with a worried look. "Brake failure." "I'm fine, just a bit shaken up." "Oh my God, Joseph!" Betty put her hand over her mouth. "You could have been seriously hurt." "Dad, that's terrifying." Audrey stepped back, her eyes wide. "You could have died." I looked directly into her eyes. "I know, sweetie." What was she really thinking behind those concerned eyes? Was she hoping I wouldn't make it home tonight? Had she been waiting for a phone call from the police telling her I was dead? "I'm just glad you're safe," Betty said, hugging me. "That's all that matters." I hugged her back mechanically. Safe? I wasn't safe. Not in this house. Not with these people. We had a late dinner. They doted on me, asked questions, and expressed relief and worry at all the right moments. I watched Audrey closely, examining every expression and every word, looking for a crack in her performance. But she played her part perfectly. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Betty slept peacefully beside me. The house settled around us, the wood creaking, the pipes groaning, the refrigerator humming downstairs. Every sound made me tense. Somewhere in this house, the person who tried to end my life was fast asleep. At 2 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my phone, went to the bathroom, locked the door, and called Beverly. She answered on the second ring. "Joseph? We need to move faster," I whispered, "before she tries again." 3 days after the brake incident, Beverly called with information that made everything much clearer and infinitely darker. It was Saturday morning, 13 days since I had discovered the truth. I sat in a quiet cafe on Portland's east side, across from Beverly, far from anyone who might recognize me. She slid a thick folder across the table. "This is what I found on Evan Cross." I opened it. The first page was a copy of his driver's license, the confident smile, the eyes that looked at my daughter with calculating interest. 32 years old, a personal trainer at Equinox in the Pearl District, making about $45,000 a year while renting an apartment that cost $2,800 a month. I did some quick math. So most of his income goes to rent. Exactly. Beverly pulled out more photos. But look at what he drives. A Mercedes. A dark blue one, just like the one I had photographed outside Walter and Mildred's house. I had looked up the model later. It was worth $65,000. Then there were his clothes. More photos showed designer brands and expensive watches. That's not the lifestyle of someone making $45,000 a year, Joseph. Where is the money coming from? Clearly, it's coming from Audrey, from your accounts. Then she showed me the surveillance photos. Evan and Audrey, outside a restaurant, his arm around her waist. Evan and Audrey walking into his apartment building, her holding his hand. A kiss on a street corner made my stomach churn. Then came the photos of Evan and Betty. A coffee shop, casual conversation. But the body language was entirely different. Professional, distant, no physical contact. And Audrey believes Evan loves her. Betty believes the same thing. But Evan only loves the money. The words hung over me like ice. On Monday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Philip. "Joseph, you might want to sit down." I was already at my desk, but his tone made me tense up. "I've finished the full analysis. What I found." He paused. "It's worse than we thought. Tell me, 8 months ago, a transfer of $50,000 was made from your investment account." The memo read, "Investment, Evan's Gym Startup." What gym? There is no gym, no business registration, no LLC, nothing. The money went directly into Evan's personal account. $50,000 gone. For a business that never existed. And the mortgage on your house, the $120,000 one, I tracked where that money went. It went to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The signature is yours, but it's not mine. It's a forgery. I figured that. And, Joseph, there's one more thing. Your life insurance policy. I already knew what he was going to say, but I let him continue. $1 million. 6 months ago, the beneficiary was changed from Betty to Audrey. The authorization signature is supposedly yours as well. I never signed that authorization. I know. But if you pass away, Audrey gets $1 million. My blood ran cold, the brake lines, the failed attempt. She needed me gone. Philip, thank you. Send me all the paperwork. Already sent. Joseph, please be careful. Wednesday night, day 17. I came home early, told Betty I had a headache, set, and went upstairs to lie down. But I didn't go to the bedroom. I went to my office and quietly closed the door. Audrey was in her room. Through the wall, I could hear her voice. She was on the phone. I moved into the hallway and stood outside her door. My mom thinks you're her boyfriend, Evan. Audrey's voice was clear. A man's voice came through the speaker. It was Evan. Let her think that. We need her cooperation. But what about your dad? When is this going to be over? My heart stopped. Be patient, babe. The first try didn't work. But there are other ways. I can't wait much longer. I need that insurance money. Soon. Very soon. I promise. I stood frozen in the hallway. Every word was a knife. They were planning to end my life. My daughter and her boyfriend were actively plotting my demise so they could collect $1 million. And Betty, my wife, was just a pawn. She believed Evan cared about her, completely unaware that he was just using and manipulating her to keep her compliant, while he and Audrey planned a murder. Backed away from the door, walked downstairs, entered my office, locked the door, and sat at my desk with my head in my hands. 20 years of age, 24 years of marriage, a daughter I had loved since birth, and it had all led to this. Sitting in my own home, listening to my child discuss the best way to end my life. I picked up my phone and called Benjamin. We need to speed things up, I said, my voice trembling. They're planning another attempt, and this time they might succeed. Benjamin's response was cold and calculated. Then we strike first. Tomorrow, we fast-track everything. Just 2 days after overhearing Audrey's phone call, on a quiet Sunday morning, the second attempt came. It was much more direct, and it almost succeeded. Sunday, 9 a.m. I sat in the living room with the newspaper spread across my lap, trying to maintain the appearance of normalcy, even though every nerve in my body was on high alert. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Audrey walked down, already dressed, with a bright smile on her face. Morning, Dad. Want some coffee? I can make your favorite. I looked up from the paper. My favorite, a caramel latte with an extra shot of espresso. She only made that on special occasions. That sounds wonderful, sweetie. She disappeared into the kitchen. I heard the espresso machine hiss and the clink of cups. 10 minutes later, she returned with a large ceramic mug. An extra shot, just the way you like it. She set it on the coffee table in front of me with a warm smile. Thank you, Audrey. She sat on the sofa near me, picking up her phone but not really looking at it. Instead, she watched me out of the corner of her eye. I cupped the warm mug in my hands, steam rising from the surface. The aroma was perfect, rich coffee and sweet caramel, exactly how I liked it. Was this it? Was this the moment? I couldn't show fear, couldn't let her know. I suspected anything. I took a sip. The taste was normal. Sweet, rich, exactly right. I took another sip, and then another. Over the next 20 minutes, I drank half the mug while reading the sports section, occasionally making small talk with Audrey. She responded normally, laughing at the right moments and asking questions. A perfect daughter spending a quiet Sunday morning with her father. At 9:45 a.m., the room tilted. I gripped the armrests of the chair as the newspaper slipped from my lap. Dad? Audrey's voice sounded incredibly distant. Are you okay? My heart was racing, pounding so hard I could hear it echoing in my ears. The room spun like a carnival ride. I don't feel right. I tried to stand, but my legs buckled. I fell heavily, my shoulder hitting the floor. Through the fog in my mind, I barely felt the impact. I couldn't breathe. My chest was incredibly tight, constricting. The edges of my vision went dark. "Dad! Mom!" Betty's footsteps came thundering down the stairs. "Call 911, I tried to say. But I couldn't form the words. The ceiling swam above me. Audrey's face appeared over me, her expression a perfect mask of concern. "Call 911. Her voice was shrill with panic. "Mom, do it now." Betty's voice came from far away. My husband collapsed. He's barely breathing. The world flickered. Darkness closed in from all sides. My last clear thought was that she had done it. She had put something in the coffee. Then, there was nothing. Fluorescent lights, the ticking of machines, and the sterile smell of a hospital greeted me as I slowly opened my eyes. I saw white ceiling tiles and an IV in my arm. A doctor stood by the bed, reviewing a chart. He noticed I was awake. "All right, Mr. Barrett, you're at Providence Portland Medical Center. You had a severe reaction. Your wife brought you in. What happened?" "We found extremely high levels of a sedative in your system, enough to cause respiratory failure. How many did you take this morning?" My brain raced through the fog. I needed to be careful. I couldn't reveal the truth yet, not until everything was ready. I must have taken the sleeping pills by mistake. Thought they were vitamins. The doctor looked highly skeptical. "Mr. Barrett, the concentration we found is equivalent to a dose of 8 to 10 pills. Are you sure this was an accident? I've been under a lot of stress lately. Work stuff. I must not have been paying attention." He studied me for a long moment. "We need to keep you overnight for observation." After he left, Betty and Audrey were allowed in. Betty rushed to the bedside, tears streaming down her face. "Joseph, you scared us to death." Audrey took my hand, squeezing it gently. Her fingers felt cold. "Dad, you need to be more careful with your pills." I looked into her eyes and saw perfect concern, perfect worry, a flawless performance. "I will, sweetie. I promise." She let go of my hand, but not before lingering for a fraction of a second. As she turned her back to me, I could have sworn I saw a flicker of something else cross her face. Disappointment. Frustration. She had expected me to die today. That night, after Betty and Audrey had gone home, and the nurses had finished their final rounds, I locked myself in the hospital bathroom with my phone. My hands shook as I dialed Beverly's number. "She tried again," I whispered. "Something in the coffee. A sedative. I barely made it." Beverly's voice came through, cold as steel. "Joseph, we are ending this now. I'm arranging 24-hour security. We need 1 week to make sure everything is absolutely airtight. Next Sunday. We end this next Sunday." Benjamin called it the endgame. I called it justice. Either way, we had 1 week to prepare for the moment that would change everything. Wednesday morning, day 23. I sat in Benjamin's conference room, surrounded by the wreckage of my family's betrayal. Benjamin, Beverly, and Philip were all present. The table between us was covered in documents, photos, and printed transcripts of the recordings. "Let's go over what we have," Benjamin said, organizing the files into neat stacks. First, the audio recordings. A full 5 minutes of Betty and Audrey casually discussing how they're stealing from you. Clear, undeniable proof. Next, Beverly's surveillance photos, he continued. Evan and Audrey kissing, holding hands, entering his apartment. Evan and Betty talking at the cafe, keeping a deliberate distance. Then, Philip's financial analysis. Philip pushed a comprehensive report toward me. $234,000 stolen via wire transfers over 18 months. $120,000 taken by forging a mortgage on your home. $50,000 transferred for a fake gym investment. He looked up at me. Total. $404,000. The number hung heavily in the air. And the life insurance policy change, Philip added. $1 million. 6 months ago, the beneficiary was changed from Betty to Audrey. Your signature was forged. Beverly chipped in with her findings. The brake tampering. We have the mechanic's report showing deliberate sabotage. And we have the hospital records from your sedative overdose. Benjamin tapped the table. This is more than enough for criminal charges. Fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit great bodily harm. The evidence is overwhelming. What about Evan? I asked. Beverly's expression shifted slightly. I'm digging deeper. There's a bigger picture here. Give me 2 more days. We don't have 2 days. This Sunday is. I know, she said, meeting my gaze. You'll have everything you need by then. I promise. Next came the security arrangements. I've set up 24-hour security, Beverly said. Derek, a military veteran. He'll be posing as a new neighbor. He's armed, highly trained, and he'll have eyes on your house at all times. I nodded. The attempts on my life had escalated. I couldn't take any more chances. My daily routine changed drastically. I stopped eating any food prepared by Betty or Audrey. Every meal came from restaurants, in sealed containers that I opened myself. I locked my bedroom door at night. And I thoroughly inspected my car every morning before starting the ignition. Betty noticed the shift on Tuesday evening. Honey, you're acting strange. Is everything okay? I forced a smile. Just stressed with work. A major client is about to sign. She seemed to accept it, but I saw the worry in her eyes. Or perhaps it was suspicion. I could no longer tell the difference. Friday night, day 26. We were sitting around the dinner table, Betty, Audrey, and I, eating takeout Chinese. I set my chopsticks down, keeping my voice casual. Let's have a family dinner this Sunday night, right here at home. Betty looked up, surprised but pleased. That sounds wonderful. Any special occasion? I have a major decision to announce about our future. Audrey's eyes narrowed slightly. I hope it's good news. Oh, you'll find out soon enough. I took a sip of water. And Audrey, why don't you invite Evan? I'd like to officially meet him. The shift in her expression was instantaneous. Panic flared across her face before she quickly masked it. Evan? Why? Your mother mentioned he was incredibly helpful with your grandparents' health issues. I'd like to thank him properly. Betty looked confused but didn't object. She still believed Evan was somehow involved in helping her parents. Audrey's voice was cautious. I'll ask him. Great, Sunday night, 7 o'clock. A formal dinner. I went back to eating as if the conversation were nothing but small talk. But I saw it. The split second of pure panic. She knew something was wrong. The trap was set, and she could feel it. Saturday, day 27, the final preparations. Benjamin called with an update. The police are on standby. Plainclothes officers in unmarked vehicles will be parked 2 blocks away. They'll move on your signal. Beverly arrived at my house in the morning to install hidden cameras. Tiny devices were placed in various corners of the dining room, living room, and entryway. Everything was routed to a secure server. Everything will be recorded, she said. Audio and video. Court-admissible quality. I spent the afternoon in my office, drafting and revising what I wanted to say, practicing keeping my voice steady and my hands still. At 6 p.m., I called Beverly. "Do you have the update on Evan?" "I'm tracking a massive lead. You'll have it tomorrow morning." "Joseph, this is bigger than we thought. This information is going to change everything." "How so?" "Let's just say even Audrey is going to realize she's been played." Sunday morning arrived, bright and cold. At dawn, I stood in the kitchen, watching the sun rise over the Portland skyline. The city was waking up, apartment lights flickering, morning traffic starting to move. By sunset, everything would be different. My family would be shattered. The truth would be exposed. And somewhere in the city, Beverly was preparing the final piece of evidence, a secret about Evan Cross that would prove even my daughter was just a pawn in a much larger game. I poured myself a cup of coffee, brewed by my own hands in my own kitchen, and waited for the day to begin. Sunday evening, 6 o'clock. The dinner that would end everything was about to begin. At 4, I had started setting the dining room table. The fine china that was only used for special occasions. The white tablecloth, candles and silver holders. Everything arranged with absolute precision. Betty was in the kitchen, the scent of roasting chicken filling the house. "Joseph, this looks beautiful," she called out. "What is this big decision you mentioned? You'll hear about it soon enough." 5 o'clock. Audrey came downstairs, dressed up in a black dress, pearl earrings, and flawless makeup. But her hand kept drifting to her phone, checking it, putting it down, and checking it again. "Is Evan coming?" I asked casually. "He'll be here at 6. Good." At 5:45, my phone buzzed. A text from Benjamin. "Cameras are live. Police are ready." Good luck. I took a deep breath. At 5:55, the doorbell rang. Audrey practically ran to answer it. I stayed in the living room and listened. "Hey, babe." Evan's voice. A kiss. "You look beautiful." They walked in together. Evan was wearing a button-down shirt and dress pants. He looked polished, confident, the kind of man who used charm to disarm people. I stood up and offered my hand. "You must be Evan. I'm Joseph." His grip was firm, his smile easy. "It's great to finally meet you, sir. I've heard a lot about you." I took him in, younger than I expected. Around 32, as Beverly had said. Handsome, that magnetic presence that made people want to believe whatever came out of his mouth. "Evan." Betty stepped out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "I'm so glad you could make it." She walked over to hug him. Evan returned the hug politely, but I saw it even as Betty's arms were around him, his body angled toward Audrey. A subtle shift. A detail Betty missed. I was noticing all the details. "Shall we sit?" Betty gestured to the dining room. "Dinner is just about ready." But I wanted to wait a few more minutes. I wanted to watch them interact in this space where they thought they were safe. "Let's chat for a moment first," I said. "Can I get you a drink, Evan?" "Just water is fine." "Thank you." We sat in the living room. Betty returned to the kitchen. Audrey sat on the sofa with Evan next to her. Close but not touching, playing their parts. "Beautiful home, Mr. Barrett." "Thank you. The result of 20 years of hard work." "Audrey mentioned that you know I'm a financial advisor." "Yes, that's right." I looked him straight in the eyes. "I help people protect their assets, make sure nobody takes advantage of them." Something flickered across his face. Brief, quickly covered. Audrey stood up abruptly. "Dad, should we head to the dining room?" "Mom should be ready." "Of course." The dining room table looked flawless. The candlelight had cast warm shadows. The golden brown roasted chicken sat on a platter, surrounded by roasted potatoes and vegetables. I sat at the head of the long table. Betty was on my right. Audrey on my left. Evan next to her. Betty served the food, moving with practiced ease as she filled our plates. When Audrey took her plate, her hand was shaking slightly. "This looks wonderful, sweetheart," I said to Betty. "Thank you." She sat down, smoothing her napkin over her lap. "Shall we say grace?" "Of course." We held hands. My right hand held Betty's. My left held Audrey's. Both of them had betrayed me. Both of them had plotted against me. And here we sat, holding hands like a family. "Lord, thank you for this food, and thank you for this family." "Amen. Amen," they echoed. I released their hands and picked up my fork. The silence was thick, heavy, suffocating. Nobody seemed to know how to break it. Betty tried. "So, Evan, how did you and Audrey meet?" "At the gym where I work." "She actually." I interrupted him, setting my fork down deliberately. The sound of metal hitting china rang sharply in the quiet room. Everyone looked at me. Betty's expression was confused. Audrey's smile froze. Evan's hand hovered, fork suspended. I looked at each of them. My wife, my daughter, Dov, the man who helped destroy my life. Still pretending, but the show was over. They still acting. Before we go any further, my voice was calm and controlled. "There are a few things we need to discuss." Betty set her wine glass down. "Joseph, what's wrong?" Audrey's face had gone completely pale. Evan slowly lowered his fork. His eyes locked on me. "We need to discuss the $234,000 that was stolen from me." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Absolute silence fell over the table. Betty's fork clattered onto her plate. "What, Joseph? What are you talking about?" I kept my voice even, cold. "The weekly wire transfers. $3,000 a week, every week for 18 months, sent to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands." "Dad, I didn't." Audrey started. "Don't lie, Audrey." "There's no point anymore." Betty's face drained of color. "There must be some mistake." "There is no mistake." I reached down and picked up the folder I had hidden next to my chair. "I have the records of every single transaction." I opened it, spreading the bank statements across the table. Every transfer was highlighted in bright yellow. The dates, the amounts, the destinations. It was all there in black and white. I pushed the folder toward Betty. She looked down at the pages, her hand trembling as she touched them. I can explain. I don't want an explanation. I want the truth." Betty's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. I pulled out my phone. "Let's listen to something." "Joseph, don't." Betty's voice cracked. I pressed play. Betty's voice came through the phone speaker, clear and unmistakable. "Did you transfer the $3,000 this week?" Followed by Audrey's response. "Handled it this morning, Mom. Dad never checks those statements anyway." Then Betty's voice, "What's the total now?" And Audrey's reply, $234,000. The recording kept playing. For 2 full minutes, my wife and daughter casually discussed how they were robbing me. Every word was precise, every admission damning. Betty put her hands over her mouth, tears starting to flow down her cheeks. Audrey sat frozen, completely bloodless. Evan remained still, watching everything with a calculating look. When the recording ended, I set the phone down. "Recorded 3 weeks ago at your parents' house in Salem." Betty looked up at me, her eyes wide with shock. You were there. Your parents were never sick, Betty. Never. You lied so you could meet with Audrey and plan this. I kept my tone level. I heard everything. I saw everything. Joseph, I'm so sorry, Betty's voice shook. Sorry for what? Sorry for stealing, or sorry for getting caught. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. I was lonely, the words spilled out of her. You were never home. Always working, always with clients. So, you stole my money. That's your excuse. Audrey said we deserved it, said you wouldn't even notice it was gone. I turned to Audrey. You said that. My daughter's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Dad, please, I'm done with the lies. I pulled out more documents, the mortgage on the house, $120,000 taken out a year ago. I slid the paper toward Betty. Look at the signature. She did. Her face went even whiter. That's not my signature, I said quietly. It's a forgery. Someone took out a loan on our house using my name. I added to the pile. The fake gym investment. $50,000 sent to a company that doesn't exist. Betty stared at the papers as if they were written in a foreign language. $404,000, all gone. I didn't know about those, Betty sobbed. Joseph, I swear I only knew about the weekly transfers. But you knew enough. My voice was like ice. You knew you were stealing from me. You knew you were lying to my face every single day. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently. Audrey sat rigidly in her chair, barely breathing, and Evan watched it all unfold with a cold, detached curiosity. I let the silence stretch, letting them sit with what they had done. Then I spoke again. But that's not even the worst of it, Betty. She looked up, her face streaked with tears. What do you mean? The worst of it is what you didn't know. I looked at Audrey, then at Evan, then back to Betty. Tell your mother the truth, Audrey. Tell her about Evan. All the color drained from Audrey's face. She looked like she was going to be sick. Evan's jaw tightened, his hand moving slightly under the table. Betty looked between them, her grief turning to confusion. What about Evan? He's been helping us, helping my parents. Helping you, I spat the word out. Or using you. I don't understand. I think you do. Deep down, I think you've known something was wrong for a long time. Betty looked at Evan, really looking at him. For the first time tonight, suspicion crept into her expression. Evan has been so supportive of our family, I continued. Of you, Betty. Making you feel seen, making you feel valued. Isn't that right? She nodded slowly, unsure of where I was going. And you believed he cared about you. That finally, someone saw you in all those years I was absent. More tears fell. Joseph. It was a lie, Betty. Look at how he's sitting. Look at who he chose to sit next to. She looked. Evan was sitting next to Audrey, not her. Look at how he's sitting. Under the table, I can see things you can't. Evan's hand was gripping Audrey's thigh. Audrey was leaning slightly toward him, not away. Betty's eyes moved between them, the confusion deepening. She hadn't figured it out yet, but she was about to. I reached under my chair and pulled out a tablet I had hidden before dinner. I opened a video file. Beverly Quinn is a very good investigator. I pressed play and turned the screen toward her. The video showed a street corner in the Pearl District. Evan and Audrey were standing close together, outside an apartment building. Then Evan pulled her close and kissed her deeply, his hand on her waist, her fingers tracing his face. They were both smiling. The timestamp read, last Tuesday, 2:47 p.m. Betty's face contorted with disbelief, then denial, then pure horror. No, that's not possible. The video transitioned to the next clip, a coffee shop. Audrey sitting on Evan's lap, his arm around her waist. Another clip, a restaurant. Holding hands across the table, looking at each other like lovers. Another, an apartment building at night. 11 p.m., walking in together. Betty stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Audrey, you and Evan? Tears were streaming down Audrey's face. Mom, I'm sorry. Sorry? Betty's voice was cracked. I thought he loved me. He never loved you, Betty. I kept my voice cold. He was using you. Evan spoke for the first time since sitting down. This is ridiculous. Sit down, Evan. I'm not finished. He stood, keeping a defensive posture. I ignored him and kept my focus on Betty. Audrey met Evan 10 months ago. They planned the whole thing. The theft, the offshore accounts, using you as an accomplice so you wouldn't ask questions. Betty turned to Audrey, her face twisted in pain. You let me believe he cared about me. Mom, you were unhappy. So you used my loneliness, my unhappiness, to steal from your father. She used everything, I said. Your marital issues, my work schedule, even your parents. My parents knew about this? No, they were innocent. They were actually sick that day. But Audrey used it as a cover to meet with Evan and finalize the plans. Dad, please. Audrey reached out to me. But stealing wasn't enough for you, was it, Audrey? I pulled out more documents, laying them on the table one by one. The change of beneficiary on my life insurance policy 6 months ago. From your mother to you, $1 million. I let the words sit. I never signed that authorization. It's a forgery. Another document. The mechanic's report. My brake lines were deliberately cut 3 weeks ago. I almost crashed on I-5 at 65 miles an hour. Betty's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. And just 2 Sundays ago, Audrey, I collapsed after drinking the coffee you made. The hospital found dangerous levels of a sedative in my system, enough to cause respiratory failure. Betty turned to Audrey, her eyes wide with terror. You tried to hurt your father. No, I would never. I have the recordings, Audrey. I heard you on the phone with Evan. When is this going to be over? You asked him. I need that insurance money. Audrey's face crumbled. I was drowning in debt. Austin Mercer scammed me out of $85,000. I lost everything. Evan said he would help me. Evan helped you plan to end my life. That is a lie! Evan's voice was sharp. I ignored him, focusing instead on the devastating blow, spreading across Betty's face. I thought we were in this together, Betty whispered, staring at Audrey as if looking at a stranger. Mother and daughter, you were just a pawn, Betty. Audrey and Evan have been playing you from the very beginning. Betty sat down heavily, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. Mom. Audrey reached out to her. Mom, please. Betty whipped her hand away. Don't touch me. The 3 words hung in the air. A mother rejecting her child. Audrey sobbed, but Betty turned her face away. I stood up from my chair and walked toward the dining room doorway. All eyes followed me. But there is one more thing, I said quietly. One last lie that needs to be exposed. I looked directly at Evan. Tell them, Evan. Tell them about your real life. The one Audrey doesn't know about. Evan's face went white, the mask of confidence he had worn all night finally shattered. For the first time, he looked truly terrified. I stepped to the dining room entrance and called out, You can come in now. The sound of the front door opening echoed through the house. Footsteps in the hallway, slow and hesitant. A young woman appeared in the doorway. holding a small boy in her arms. She was wearing scrubs under an open coat, her face showing the exhaustion of consecutive double shifts. The little boy, about 5 years old, clutched a teddy bear tightly to his chest, looking around the elegant dining room, the scattered documents, and the frozen faces staring back at him. Absolute silence filled the room. Evan's fork clattered onto his plate. His face went pale, not just white, but completely bloodless. He stood up so fast his chair fell backward with a loud crash, causing Noah to flinch and bury his face in his mother's shoulder. "No, no, no," he whispered, as if he could somehow make reality disappear by denying it. The woman looked at him, her voice a mix of confusion and worry. "Ivan, what is this? You said this was an important meeting with a client." I kept my voice calm and measured, as if introducing guests at a dinner party rather than detonating a bomb. "Everyone, this is Megan Cross, and this is Noah." Audrey's head whipped toward them. Who are they?" I let the silence stretch for 3 heartbeats, then 4, then 5. "Megan is Evan's wife, and Noah is his 5-year-old son." The words hung in the air for a perfect, clear second, and then everything exploded. Audrey stood up so fast, she shook. Her chair screeched against the floor. "Wife? Son? Evan, you told me you were single. You said you'd never been married." Betty's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes darted between Evan and the woman in the doorway, trying to process what she was seeing. "Oh my God! Oh my God!" Megan took a step back, instinctively pulling Noah closer. Her eyes filled with tears. "Evan, who are these people? Why is that woman calling you that?" Evan held up his hands, as if he could physically push reality away. "Megan, this isn't. I can explain." "You can't explain this." Audrey's voice broke with hysteria. She pointed a trembling finger at Noah. "You have a child." I walked over to Megan, my movements soft and slow, so as not to scare Noah further. The little boy's eyes were wide, his knuckles white around his teddy bear. "Megan, thank you for coming. I know this is incredibly difficult. Mr. Barrett, you said you had important information about my husband." Her voice cracked. "You said it was urgent, that I needed to bring Noah. Please, have a seat." I gestured to the empty chair next to Betty. Then I knelt down, leveling my eyes with Noah's. "Noah, would you like to go to the kitchen and have some cookies? Maybe watch something on the iPad? I have cartoons." The boy looked up at his mother, uncertain. Megan hesitated, looking around the room, taking in Evan's pale face, Audrey's tears, and Betty's shocked expression. Then she gave a slow nod. "No, sweetie. Go with this nice man for a minute, okay? Mommy needs to talk to some grown-ups." Noah whispered, "Is Daddy in trouble?" The question hung in the air. Nobody answered. I took Noah's hand, so small, so trusting, and led him into the kitchen. I set him up at the counter with a plate of chocolate chip cookies and Patrol playing on the iPad. He settled in happily, swinging his legs, completely oblivious to the devastating storm unfolding just on the other side of the wall. When I returned to the dining room, all eyes were on me, except for Evans. He was staring at the floor, his jaw working but making no sound. "Megan lives in Vancouver, Washington," I began, my voice steady. "She's a nurse at Providence Hospital. Works night shifts mostly. She's been married to Evan for 6 years. They've been together 7 years. This past June," Megan corrected softly, her voice barely a whisper. "We had a party. Noah made a drawing. You said..." She looked at Evan. "You said it was the best day of your life." He still wouldn't look at her. I nodded. During my investigation, I discovered that Evan has been living a double life. Monday through Wednesday in Vancouver with you and Noah. I pointed to Audrey. Thursday through Sunday here in Portland with my daughter. That's not true. Audrey's voice was desperate now, pleading. Evan, tell them it's not true. But Evan said nothing. He just stood there like a statue, his hands clenched tightly at his sides. Those private clients he told you about. I looked at Megan. That was Audrey. The consulting work that kept him in Portland. That was this affair. Megan turned to Evan, her voice shaking. All those late nights you said you were training clients. All those weekends you said you had to work. The tuition for Noah's preschool that was suddenly paid for. The new car we couldn't afford. Where did all of that come from? Silence. Answer her, Audrey screamed. Tell her where you got the money. From this family, I said quietly. From the accounts my daughter stole from me over 18 months. $234,000. Money meant for her future, for our retirement. Evan has been using it to fund his life with you, Megan. Your car, Noah's school, your mortgage, all of it. Megan pressed her hands to her face, tears streaming down. Noah's tuition, our house. It was all stolen money. I'm so sorry, Megan. You deserve to know the truth. Audrey stepped toward Evan, her hands reaching out like a drowning person, grasping for a lifeline. You said you loved me. You said we'd get married once we had enough money. You said, her voice was cut off by a sob. You said you'd never leave me. Evan finally spoke, his voice hollow and dead. Audrey, but you said I was the only one. You said Betty was just a means to an end, that I was the real plan. Megan let out a bitter, broken laugh. He told me the exact same thing at our wedding 7 years ago. He said, I would always be his. The silence that followed was absolute. Audrey collapsed back into her chair, her entire body curling inward as if she had been physically struck. She buried her face in her hands. It was all a lie, everything, all of it. Yes, my voice was flat, though I felt nothing but ice inside. Evan Cross is a professional con man. He targeted you, Audrey. Saw your vulnerability, your desperation, and he used it. Used you to get to my money. Used your mother's loneliness to keep his cover. Just like he's been using Megan and Noah. No, Audrey's voice was muffled by her hands. No, he wouldn't. He did, and he's done. I turned to Megan. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Megan wiped her eyes, straightening her back. I'm glad I know. Better now than later. She looked at Evan, her expression holding a trace of pity. Our marriage is over. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. Megan, please. Evan finally found his voice, desperate and pleading. Don't. She held up a hand. Do not speak to me, not after this. Not after you used our son's tuition. Her voice cracked. Our child, how could you? Audrey looked up at me, mascara running down her cheeks in dark rivers. Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Sorry isn't enough, Audrey. Austin Mercer took everything. $85,000. I was desperate. I had nothing left, and Evan said he would help me. And you chose to trust a stranger over your own father. I had to force the next words, past the tightening in my throat. You chose money over family. You chose to steal from me, to alter my life insurance, to cut my brake lines, to poison my coffee. She cried harder but said nothing. There was nothing left to say. You made your choice, I repeated, to try and end my life. Betty finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Joseph, please, I looked at her, the woman I had been married to for 24 years, the woman who had sat in that same chair for thousands of dinners, the woman who raised our daughter, the woman who stood by me through weddings, funerals, and everything in between. And you condoned it, Betty, I said quietly. You saw what was happening. You heard the conversations. You knew about the money, and you said nothing. I didn't think. She stopped, then started again. I thought it was just a loan I was never consulted about and never agreed to. I shook my head. You are just as guilty. The room fell silent once more, save for Audrey's muffled sobbing and the distant sound of Noah's laughter from the kitchen, still watching his cartoons. I pulled out my phone and placed a call. Detective Warren, you can come in now. The front door opened again, this time with authority. 2 uniformed officers stepped in first, hands resting on their utility belts. Behind them came a woman in her 40s, with a detective's badge clipped to her belt. Mr. Barrett, Detective Warren said, nodding to me. We heard everything through the audio feed. I touched the tiny recording device clipped to the inside of my shirt collar. You have all the evidence, word for word, clear as day. She turned her attention to Audrey and Evan, her expression professional and cold. Audrey Barrett, Evan Cross. You are under arrest for fraud, grand theft, and conspiracy to commit great bodily harm. She began reading them their Miranda rights in a calm, practiced voice. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Audrey stood up on trembling legs as an officer stepped behind her, producing a pair of handcuffs. The metallic click echoed through the room. Dad, please! Audrey's voice rose to a shrill scream. Don't do this. Please, I'm your daughter. I turned my head away, unable to watch the cuffs secure around her wrists. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one will be provided for you. The second officer handcuffed Evan, who went quietly without a word. His face was blank, all the charm and confidence drained away, leaving nothing but an empty shell. They led Audrey toward the door. She struggled slightly in the officer's grip, looking back at me one last time. Daddy, she whispered. She hadn't called me that since she was 10 years old. But I said nothing, watching them guide her out and into the waiting police cruiser. Through the dining room window, red and blue lights flashed rhythmically, painting the walls in alternating colors. Betty had collapsed completely at the table, her body shaking with deep, agonizing sobs. Megan held Noah, who had run out of the kitchen at the sound of the commotion. The little boy's face was filled with confusion and fear, tears streaming down his face as he watched his father being led away in handcuffs. Mommy, why are they taking Daddy? What did Daddy do? Megan couldn't answer. She only held him tighter. I stood alone in the center of the dining room, surrounded by the wreckage of everything I had ever built. Overturned chairs, scattered papers, untouched food, half-empty wine glasses, and a family that had just been destroyed beyond repair. Justice had been served, but at the cost of everything I had ever loved. Through the window, I watched the police cars drive away, their lights fading into the distance. Betty sobbed, Noah cried for his father, and Megan stared into the empty space. I stood in the ruins of my life, wondering if this was what winning was supposed to feel like. The weeks following the arrests were a blur of lawyers, courtrooms, and media attention I never wanted. The first week hit like a sledgehammer. I spent 8 hours at the police station, giving my full statement, recounting every detail, every recording, and every document. The detectives thorough, and organized. By the time I walked out, the sky was pitch black and my voice was completely hoarse. Audrey and Evan were denied bail. Considering the offshore accounts and evidence of premeditation, they pose a significant flight risk, the judge ruled. They would remain in custody until trial. Betty was questioned for hours, but she cooperated fully, handing over everything she knew. 2 days later, she moved out of our house and went to stay with her sister on the other side of town. The media swarmed. Headlines read, "Local father uncovers daughter's elaborate theft plot." My phone rang constantly with calls from reporters, concerned friends, and complete strangers wanting details. I changed my number and began living like a ghost in my own life. Benjamin handled the press. Mr. Barrett requests privacy during this difficult time. But privacy just meant being alone in that empty house, walking through rooms that suddenly felt too big and too quiet. One afternoon, I found myself standing in Audrey's bedroom, looking at her high school trophies, her graduation photos, and the memory collages on the walls. Where did I go wrong? Weeks 2 through 8 were consumed by trial preparation. The prosecution team, led by Assistant District Attorney Sarah Mitchell, a woman with 20 years of experience known for her relentless approach, meticulously built their case. The defense tried to secure a plea deal. Benjamin sat across from me in his office. They're offering a deal. Audrey would plead guilty to lesser charges, 3 years instead of 10. No deals, I said. It will be incredibly painful to see Audrey on the stand, but we need the truth on the record. All of it. No shortcuts. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. A full trial it is, then. The pre-trial hearings were brutal. Audrey's defense attorney argued she was manipulated, claiming she was a victim of psychological abuse and gaslighting by Evan Cross. Evan's attorney claimed a lack of direct evidence linking him to thus physical harm would stand, but most moment was when he took the stand as a witness for the prosecution against our daughter. Audrey told me Joseph wouldn't notice the money was gone, Betty said, her voice shaking. She said he deserved it. Megan filed for a divorce from Evan. When she testified, her voice remained steady despite her tears. He told me he was working late, training clients. In reality, he was with Audrey. On March 15th, the trial began. The courtroom was packed with media and onlookers. People I had known for years watched my personal devastation become public record. The following day, I took the stand. For 4 hours, I described discovering the theft in Salem, the recordings, the brake failure on I-5, and the sedatives in my coffee. The cross-examination was savage. Mr. Barrett, were you an emotionally distant father? I worked hard to provide for my family. But did you ever tell Audrey you loved her? Every single day of her life. Yet she was desperate enough to steal from you. Why do you think that is? I had no answers that would satisfy them. On the 5th day, Audrey took the stand. She was crying before the prosecutor could even ask the first question. Her voice shook as she spoke. I made terrible mistakes. I was drowning in $85,000 of debt. Austin Mercer scammed me, and I was desperate. Evan promised to help. I trusted him. The prosecutor's voice was cold. Did you put sedatives in your father's coffee on March 10th? A long silence fell over the courtroom. Yes. Did you know it could have ended his life? Another pause, followed by a barely audible whisper. Yes. The courtroom erupted into gasps and murmurs. The judge had to call for order. On March 28th, after 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdicts. Evan Cross was found guilty on all charges. For fraud, conspiracy related to bigamy, and conspiracy to commit great bodily harm, he was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Audrey Barrett was found guilty on all charges. For fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit great bodily harm, she was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Betty Barrett, having pled guilty to lesser charges and cooperated with the prosecution, was sentenced to 3 years of probation and 500 hours of community service. As the bailiffs led a handcuffed Audrey away, she looked at me one last time. Her eyes were empty, lifeless. The daughter I raised, the little girl who used to climb onto my lap for bedtime stories, was gone. In her place stood a stranger who had tried to take everything from me, including my life. I walked out of the courthouse and into the gray Portland drizzle. Benjamin walked beside me, holding an umbrella over us both. "It's over," he said. But I knew better. The legal battle was over. The emotional one was just beginning. Dr. Helen Carver's office became my sanctuary. Twice a week, I sat in her chair, trying to put myself back together. My first session was in April. The office was nothing like I expected. Soft light filtered through sheer curtains. Instead of a clinical couch, there were comfortable chairs and plants everywhere. Ferns and succulents gave the space a sense of life. Dr. Carver, a warm 48-year-old, had eyes that seemed to look right past the defenses I had built. "Joseph, what brings you here?" I stared at my hands. "I don't know how to feel anymore. My daughter tried to kill me. My wife helped her steal my money. I got justice in court, but I don't feel any better." "Justice and healing are two different things," she said gently. "Justice is external. It happens in a courtroom. Healing is internal. It happens here, in your heart. How do I heal from this? By allowing yourself to feel everything. The anger, the grief, the betrayal. And eventually, by choosing peace over bitterness." It felt impossible. The sessions continued. Twice a week, on Tuesday and Friday afternoons, I sat in that chair and slowly began to unpack 24 years of my life. During the third week, I broke down completely. Where did I fail as a father? Dr. Carver leaned forward. "Joseph, you didn't fail. Audrey made choices, terrible, destructive choices, but they were her choices, not yours. But I must have done something wrong. Good parents raise children who are still human, who still have free will, and who are still capable of making devastating mistakes." Her voice was firm. "You cannot control another person's choices, not even your child's." In the 6th week, we talked about Betty. Was any of it real? "Some of it was," Dr. Carver said. "People are complex, Joseph. Betty loved you once. I believe that. Then things changed. Maybe she changed, or maybe the marriage did. That doesn't erase the good years. It just means the story ended differently than you expected." In May, she suggested I join a support group, Family Fraud Survivors, which met every Wednesday evening in a church basement across town. I walked in nervously, unsure of what to expect. 12 people sat in a circle, men and women of all ages, carrying the weight of family betrayal. The facilitator smiled. "Welcome, everyone. Who would like to start?" The first night, I just listened. A man in his 50s shared. "My brother stole my inheritance, clearing out my mother's accounts before she passed. We haven't spoken in 5 years. We haven't spoken in 5 years. A woman in her 60s said, 'My son forged my signature and took my house. I'm living with my daughter now.' A younger man around 30 spoke up. While I was deployed, my wife and her boyfriend drained our accounts. I came home to nothing. Every story was different, but the pain underneath was the same. I wasn't alone. By the third week, I shared my story. I kept it brief. The theft, the attempts on my life, the trial, the prison sentences. The people in the group nodded. They understood without needing explanations. A woman named Patricia spoke. The hardest part isn't the money, is it? No. It's the trust you can never get back. Exactly. August brought an unexpected sense of clarity. I woke up on a Saturday morning, knowing what I needed to do. I needed to see Audrey face to face. I called Benjamin. Can you arrange a prison visit? Are you sure, Joseph? It could be incredibly painful. For my own sake, I need closure. The visit was approved for the following Saturday, August 12th, at 2 p.m. I drove south to the Coffee Creek Correctional Facility, a 45-minute drive through farmlands and small towns. My hands shook on the wheel. What was I going to say? The security process was strict. Metal detectors, ID verification, rules about what could be brought inside. The visiting room was exactly as I had imagined. Gray walls, plastic chairs, guards keeping watch. A glass partition separated visitors from inmates. I sat down and waited. The door on the other side opened, and Audrey walked in wearing prison scrubs. She had lost weight. Her hair was pulled back simply, and she wore no makeup. She looked younger, more like the daughter I remembered. She sat down on the other side of the glass. We picked up the phones. A long silence stretched between us. Dad. Her voice broke instantly, tears streaming down her face. Hello, Audrey. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know. I was so scared, so stupid. Evan made me believe. Evan didn't make you do anything, I interrupted. You made choices, Audrey. Your own choices. I know, she sobbed. I'll regret them every single day for the rest of my life. I looked at my daughter through the glass, practicing the words I had rehearsed with Dr. Carver for weeks. Audrey, I forgive you. She slumped forward, crying harder. But I wasn't finished. Listen to me. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. Forgiveness doesn't mean what you did was right. It doesn't mean I will forget. It doesn't mean you won't serve your sentence. It means I am choosing to release the anger that has been destroying me from the inside. She pressed her hand against the glass. You took my money, my trust, and my family, I continued, but you cannot take my ability to move forward. That is mine, and I'm taking it back. I stood up. Dad, please don't go. But I hung up the phone and walked toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear her crying, but I kept walking. Forgiveness was no longer about her. It was about me. The sunrise over the Willamette River had never looked so beautiful. At 6:30 a.m., I stood in Tom McCall Waterfront Park, watching the first light of October turn the water to gold and orange. Autumn leaves fell from the trees, lining the path where I had just finished my morning run. My breathing was steady and even, a far cry from the shallow, panicked breaths of a year ago. Exactly 1 year ago today, I discovered the betrayal that shattered my family. Exactly 1 year ago, I began the journey from blind trust to devastating truth. I hadn't forgotten the anniversary. I remembered it deliberately, choosing to spend the morning by the river rather than hiding from the memories. 1 year changes everything, and 1 year changes nothing. Both statements felt true. 3 months after the trial ended, I sold the house in West Hills. I couldn't live there anymore. Not in the dining room, where I had confronted them. Not in the kitchen, where Audrey had poisoned my coffee. Not in the bedroom, where I had lain awake night after night, wondering if my family was planning my death. The house sold quickly. I didn't look back when I handed over the keys. My new apartment in the Pearl District is smaller, simpler, and entirely mine. No ghosts. No ghosts. No memories. Just clean white walls and east-facing windows that let the morning sun pour in. I kept the furnishings minimal. A sofa, a bed, and a small desk for work. I didn't need much anymore. The things I used to think were important. The big house, the expensive furniture, the perfect family photos. Didn't matter now. I transitioned to part-time consulting and financial advisory work. I still had clients who trusted me and valued my expertise. But I no longer worked 60 hours a week. I stopped sacrificing weekends and holidays. It was a lesson learned the hard way. All the money in the world is meaningless if you lose yourself in the process. Instead, I began volunteering. On Tuesday and Thursday evenings, I taught a free class at Portland Community College. Protecting yourself from financial fraud. Even from family. On the first night, 12 people showed up. By the third week, the room was packed with 40 students. There were young people trying to figure out their first credit cards, immigrants learning the American financial system, and elderly folks who had been taken advantage of by their own children or caregivers. I saw myself in each of them. The vulnerability, the desire to trust, and the fear of what happens when you don't protect yourself. I shared my story openly, not for sympathy, but to educate. If my pain could prevent even one person from going through what I endured, then it was worth it. Last month, a woman in her 70s approached me after class with tears in her eyes. Her son had been forging checks on her account for 3 years. She had suspected it but didn't want to believe it. My class gave her the courage to report him. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thank you for saving the rest of my life." I think about that hug often. It reminds me why I keep teaching, why I keep showing up. Outside of class, I began mentoring young professionals through a local nonprofit. Every Saturday morning, I met with 2 or 3 mentees at a downtown coffee shop, helping them navigate career decisions, financial planning, and life choices. Most of them were in their 20s, around Audrey's age. I tried not to dwell on the similarity, but it was there. Maybe helping them was my way of reclaiming what I lost with my daughter. Or maybe it was just the right thing to do. Then there were the connections. As I left the riverbank, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Megan Cross. "Noah asked this morning if the cookie uncle is coming back. He misses you." I smiled. Megan and I had stayed in touch. She divorced Evan immediately after his sentencing and moved back to her parents' house in Vancouver with Noah. We had grabbed coffee, twice, once in January and once in June. Both times I brought cookies for Noah, who remembered me as the nice me who gave his uncle his treats on that terrible night. Last month, I sent Megan a $500 gift card anonymously with a note. For Noah's future. From a friend. She texted me immediately, somehow knowing it was from me. I neither confirmed nor denied it. Some kindness is best left anonymous. I texted back, "Tell him the cookie. Uncle says hello. Maybe we can meet for hot chocolate soon." Betty had written to me 3 months ago. A short, carefully worded letter, expressing remorse and asking if we could talk. I hadn't replied. I wasn't sure if I ever would. Dr. Carver said it was okay not to forgive everyone, to draw boundaries even in the process of healing. Betty played her part in the betrayal, even if she was manipulated. I wasn't ready to cross that bridge yet. Maybe I never would be. Audrey's letters arrived like clockwork every month. I hadn't opened a single one. They sat in a shoebox in my closet, unopened and unread. Benjamin had asked if I planned to visit her or reply. I told him honestly, not yet. Maybe never. I don't know. Dr. Carver said that was okay, too. Yesterday was my last scheduled session with Dr. Carver. We had met twice a week for the first 8 months, and once a week for the past 4. She had guided me through the worst of the trauma, the anger, the guilt, and the grief. "Do you remember what you were like when you first walked in here?" she asked, her warm eyes examining me. I nodded. I could barely sit still. I was waiting for the next betrayal, the next attack. I felt like everyone was lying to me. And now? I paused, searching for the right words. Now, when I wake up, the first thing on my mind isn't whether someone is trying to hurt me. That's progress. Dr. Carver smiled. That is huge progress, Joseph. Healing isn't about forgetting or pretending it never happened. It's about learning to live again in the aftermath. And you are doing that. Leaving her office, I felt lighter than I had in months. After my run this morning, I sat on a bench by the river and recorded a voice memo on my phone. Not for anyone else, just for me. Maybe one day, if I find the courage to share it publicly, it will be for others who find themselves where I was. October, 1 year later. My name is Joseph Barrett. 1 year ago, my wife and daughter stole over $400,000 from me. My daughter tried to poison me. They conspired with a con man to take everything, including my life. I survived. I want you to know that if you are going through something similar, if the people you love have betrayed you, stolen from you, or tried to destroy you, you can survive. You will survive. Healing isn't linear. Some days will be harder than others. Some days you will wake up and momentarily forget what happened. Then you'll remember, and the weight will hit you all over again. That's okay. It's part of the process. I'm not telling you to forgive. Forgiveness is personal. It isn't about excusing what they did. It's about choosing your own peace and refusing to let them control you any longer. It's about letting go of the poison they left inside you. I've forgiven some, others I haven't, and maybe I never will. And that's okay too. The most important thing, I am still here. I am still standing. I am teaching, mentoring, and helping others. I am learning to trust again, slowly and carefully, but genuinely. You can do this. You can rebuild. It won't be the same, but it can be good. It can even be beautiful. This is my story. Maybe one day I'll share it, and maybe it will help someone else find their way out of the dark. But for now, I choose to live. I choose hope. I choose to believe that despite everything, there is still good in this world, and I get to be a part of it. My name is Joseph Barrett, and today, I am doing just fine. I saved the recording as My Story October. I walked into my favorite coffee shop near my apartment in the Pearl District. The young barista, Sophie, smiled at me. The usual, "Mr. Barrett?" "Just Joseph is fine," I corrected gently, with a warm smile. "And yes, please." As she prepared my coffee, I noticed an older gentleman at a corner table fumbling with his phone, looking frustrated. I walked over. "Need some help?" He looked up, surprised and grateful. "I'm trying to set up mobile banking, but I can't figure this app out." I pulled up a chair. "Let me show you." And a quick tip, always enable two-factor authentication. It protects you from fraud. 20 minutes later, he was all set up. He thanked me repeatedly and offered to buy my coffee, but I politely declined. Just pay it forward, I said. Help someone else when you can. Sophie handed me my coffee. A note scribbled on the cup. You're a good man. Don't forget that. Sophie? I looked up in surprise. She just winked and moved on to the next customer. I walked out into the October morning, stopping to look around. The leaves were falling. The river sparkled in the distance. Joggers and cyclists passed by, living their lives, pursuing their happiness. For the first time in a year, I felt a genuine, quiet sense of joy. My son sat there, not the fragile hope of previous months, but something deeper, earned through survival. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I would ever fully trust again, build another family, or stop carrying the scars of betrayal. But I knew this. I was still here. I was still fighting. I still chose to believe in the good, even after everything. And that was enough. I took a sip of my coffee and smiled at the writing on the cup. You're a good man. Maybe I was. Maybe despite everything, I still was. The morning sun warmed my face as I walked home. It was going to be a good day. And for you, listening to this story, remember this. I thought I knew my family. I thought 24 years of marriage and raising a daughter meant something. I thought trust was built on time, sacrifice, and love. I was wrong. I was blind to the warning signs. But when the dust settled and the betrayal was exposed, I was given a second chance at life, and I finally took it. Don't be like me. Don't wait until you've lost over $400,000 and almost your life to finally open your eyes. Don't confuse love with blindness, and never let your loyalty be mistaken for foolishness. What this journey taught me is that the people closest to you have the power to hurt you the most. Not because they are strangers, but because you handed them the keys to your life. You unlocked every door. You trusted them completely, and they walked right in and took everything. What I did in the end wasn't driven by anger. It was about taking a stand. It was about justice, accountability, and refusing to play the victim. It was about standing up and saying, enough. But here is the real truth about seeking justice. It doesn't automatically heal you. Holding people accountable cannot restore what was stolen from your heart. It simply closes the book on that chapter so you can finally begin writing the next one. So, check your bank accounts. Pay attention to the red flags. Trust, but always verify. Love your family, but protect yourself. And when the truth is revealed to you, no matter how painful it is, find the courage to look it right in the face. That is my advice. That is the hard-earned lesson of my life. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a deep betrayal by someone close to you? How did you find the strength to move past it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read through them, and your support helps me keep sharing these tough, important stories. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. Your presence here means more to me than you know. Before you go, please keep in mind that these stories may contain dramatized or fictional elements designed for educational and entertainment purposes. If this type of content isn't for you, feel free to explore other videos that better fit your path. Take care of yourselves and look after your finances. This is Joseph Barrett. Until next time.